Who is the best slinger of balls in the 2023 NFL Draft? Stroud, Young, Richardson, Levis. These are all names I learned in the last few months. Mostly because I'm a dad and I can't really watch college football on Saturdays. Otherwise, my child would technically be labeled a bastard for at least half the year. But rest assured, I've done my homework since the season ended, and I am ready to espouse my expert opinions. Espouse. Hooker, Bennett, Haener, McKee, see? I do know what I'm talking about. I just threw a bunch of names at you. But today, I'm going to break down who's the best of the bunch, who deserves to go number 1 overall to the Carolina Panthers, and why. While I don't know where Anthony RIchardson will go, I do not suggest a dome team drafting him after he did this at his pro day. 'Cause they would indeed have to race the... Please subscribe to this YouTube channel. Today's episode is sponsored by Manscaped.com/GoodSports. And Manscaped just dropped their brand new Weed Whacker 2.0 nose and ear hair trimmer. And you're getting a sneak peek here on That's Good Sports. Now, the timing of this is rather hilarious because about a week ago I realized I'm now growing ear hair. Ear hair! Which my stock photo wife really loved helping me trim. Luckily, I just got the new and revamped Weed Whacker 2.0. It has a 7,000 RPM motor, improved steel blade system, and an upgraded cutting performance. It's cordless and the battery will last up to 45 minutes. If it takes you longer than 45 minutes to trim your nose and ear hair, you may have a serious medical condition. The Weed Whacker 2.0 comes in Manscaped's tool sets, the Platinum and Performance packages. So if you want to get it, use my link below. Go to manscaped.com/goodsports to get 20% off and free international shipping and join the 8 million dudes already using Manscaped. College football is a strange beast. So much so that the man, and I use the word man and not kid, who's won back-to-back national championships is not considered a top quarterback prospect. Far from it, really. I'm of course talking about Georgia Bulldogs QB Stetson Bennett, who despite all of the success he's had, definitely has a couple big knocks against him that are taking him out of the running as a first-round draft pick. Hell, some mock drafts have him landing as the top insurance salesman in the state of Georgia for 2025. Now, these are a couple knocks against him that are not unique to Bennett, even in this quarterback class, but when you pair them together, it's tough to sell an NFL team on this guy. First, Bennett is 5'11", certainly not a prototypical quarterback size in the National Football League. It used to be the taller the better. And then we were introduced to Brock Osweiler and Paxton Lynch at 6'7" and 6'8", and that kind of went by the wayside. Russell Wilson won a Super Bowl, which helped get Kyler Murray picked first overall, and it really started to look like height didn't matter to NFL teams. Wrong. 2022, Russ falls off a cliff, and another cliff has no idea what to do with Kyler Murray, and suddenly short QBs are no longer in vogue. In fact, they're unfairly persecuted against. Plus, if you are short for a QB under 6 feet, you better be really fast and elusive behind the line of scrimmage. Bennett put up a respectable 4.67 40-yard dash, but he's not outrunning NFL edge rushers. Although he did produce the greatest stat line in NCAA history in the semifinal against Ohio State, negative 18 rushing yards for negative 2.6 per carry with a touchdown. Now, tall drinks of water like Justin Herbert and Trevor Lawrence are now all the rage because they can actually see over the line of scrimmage and use the middle of the football field. Except, of course, for Herbert, who mostly just checks it down to Austin Eckler now. Shortness has once again become a drawback. Thank God I'm already married. You can certainly say that for Alabama QB Bryce Young, who would probably be the slam dunk #1 overall pick if he was a couple inches taller and a about, 10 pounds heavier. Instead, like Kyler Murray and Russell Wilson, he's around 5'10", except it doesn't really show up on film for him. Bryce Young won the Heisman in 2021, lost in the national title game to Georgia, and completed his career at Alabama with the Sugar Bowl victory over Kansas State, where he was basically perfect, which is really an important point of evaluation. Quarterbacks who play the same in big moments as regular games are the guys you want leading your football team. Now, Young might be shorter than the other guys in this draft, but he plays big from the pocket. He's a grower, not a shower.
If that's not something that, someone can get over, I completely respect it.
He'll make full reads across the field and deliver the ball with pinpoint accuracy. He's calm in the pocket, but when that protection breaks down, there's no one better. We're used to the common narrative that Alabama is the easiest place to play quarterback in the country because their offensive line is so potent. Their receivers are all NFL starters, and their run game is automatic. And that was the case for a very, 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 very long time, and likely will be again, but that wasn't necessarily the reality in 2022. That Bama offense is really good, don't get me wrong, but it's not like when Tua or Mac Jones was there. And according to Mel Kiper, Bryce Young is the only Alabama player projected to go in the first round of the 2023 draft, which is a huge departure from what we've seen in the last decade and a half from Nick Saban's team. Now, Bryce Young is also only 21, which makes him a full 4 years younger than Stetson Bennett, and another quarterback, Tennessee's Hendon Hooker, who was spectacular in 2022 until tearing his ACL late in the season. The age is a big drawback for Hooker, who played 3 years for Virginia Tech and another 2 for the Vols, but that's probably not the most concerning part about his game. Last season, Hooker threw 27 touchdowns and just 2 picks, literally identical to Nick Foles' stat line back in 2013. A Hooker and Big Dick Nick? That's a good fit, isn't it? And like Foles, there are some concerns that Hooker's numbers might be largely a product of his offense. Joe Marino from the Draft Network said that Tennessee's system feasts on manufactured spacing with very little progression-style passing. Hooker isn't tasked with making many decisions, and throws are often predetermined. I saw a tweet somewhere, and I couldn't find it, about Hooker performing the fewest multi-read plays of any of the QBs in the draft, and it was by a pretty significant margin. Now, that doesn't mean Hooker cannot do that. It just makes him a bit harder to evaluate, but it's expected to get a bit harder with a good Hooker. Am I right? Obviously, the NFL takes a lot of processing and accuracy, and that, I believe, is the biggest strength of Ohio State's C.J. Stroud. I think if it weren't for the struggles of previous Ohio State quarterbacks, Stroud would be the unquestioned #1 pick in the draft right now, but that's just the reality for Ohio State QBs. It reminds me of the stretch of failing USC quarterbacks after Carson Palmer. You had Matt Leinart, Mark Sanchez, Matt Barkley, and Sam Darnold all having mixed to poor NFL careers. Now, CJ Stroud might be a slam dunk first pick based on the way he's interacted with Panthers QB coach Josh McCown. Unlike Bryce Young, Stroud has been awash in NFL talent at receiver, while he's been a Buckeye. Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, Jackson Smith-Njigba, and Marvin Harrison Jr. were all on the same team. Jesus Christ, that's better than almost every receiving core in the NFL right now. And scouts are drooling over Marvin Harrison Jr. for next year's draft already. So you have to take that into account, as well as the fact that he'll be labeled as a non-winner because he lost to Michigan twice and fell to Georgia in the semifinal. But that loss to Georgia might have been his most impressive game in his entire college career, and not just because he stood up to the competition. For 2 years in Columbus, Stroud stayed mostly in the pocket, delivering dime after dime with the beautiful timing and rhythm, leading a lot of scouts to think he wasn't really a dynamic athlete. Turns out he just didn't need to show that part of his athleticism off because it wasn't necessary. Until, of course, when he ran into the best team in college football. Stroud was excellent against the Bulldogs as both a passer and a scrambler, showing off an extra dimension to his game that we didn't really know he had, which only resulted in a missed field goal for Ohio to take the L. But with his arm alone in that game, he went 23 of 34 for 348 yards, 4 touchdowns, and not a single pick. Stroud is the best pure passer in this draft, and there's really no arguing that, regardless of how much time he did have to throw in the pocket and how good his receivers were. He got them the ball. Now there's another likely first rounder at QB, but he didn't have the same kind of help on offense that Stroud was working with. I'm talking about Will Levis, who started his college career at Penn State before transferring to Kentucky to become a starter, where he played 24 games over the last 2 years. Levis didn't have that full complement of NFL caliber receivers, and his numbers definitely suffered as a result. What Levis does have is the best arm in the class. He's been compared to Jay Cutler by NFL.com's Lance Zierlein, and that seems accurate in both good and bad respects. I see him as having Jay Cutler's arm strength with Tim Tebow's biceps. Is that good? I don't know. Levis will be a project. I don't see him joining a bad team and succeeding in spite of the team around him. He'll need good coaching and a team that's able to mend some of his bad habits while still harnessing that elite talent and above average athleticism. Unlike Jay Cutler, smoking is not one of his bad habits, but putting mayo in his coffee ensures he will never endorse my coffee over at BenchwarmerBrew.com. I also think Kirk Cousins is a nice comp, as I can totally see Will Levis as an eventual serial killer. Of course, there's no one with better athleticism than Anthony RIchardson from Florida, who has the potential to jump from a borderline first-round pick all the way to top 3, maybe number 1 overall. Now, I did a deep dive on Richardson in this video. Please go check it out if you want to know more about Richardson, but rest assured that he's a freak of an athlete and has a lot of boom or bust potential. He's not just the best athlete at the QB position in this draft, he might be the best overall athlete. Sometimes that works out. I think about Cam Newton, and sometimes it doesn't, which makes me think of Jadeveon Clowney. What I will say is Richardson, if he fine-tunes his voice, could be the next Barry White.
I'm excited. I'm ready. I'm gonna showcase my talents.
Baby, you're the one.
Quickly, let's go through some of the less heralded quarterbacks that you might see go on day 2 or day 3 of the draft. One guy I really like is Fresno State's Jake Haener, who's undersized at 6 feet, but has a big arm for his frame. Sounds like a Sean Payton kind of guy. Look, he even wears the number 9. Not sure if he's ever been fake struck by lightning, though. Stanford quarterback Tanner McKee is probably being overlooked because of a really weak supporting cast, but if he lands in the right situation, there's some real upside there. Easily the best Stanford QB since old Andrew Luck, not counting Christian McCaffrey, of course.
Looking to throw it, airs it out, has Ayuk wide open, he's got it!
Then you have Max Duggan, the Heisman finalist from TCU, who I think has a lot of potential as a backup or a spot starter. Sort of a Tebow or Taysom Hill role might work. It's unfair that our last memory of him is getting dogged by the dogs, but he's really a fiery player that has a place somewhere in the league. Ultimately, here's where I think each of the quarterbacks go. The Panthers traded up to number 1 with a guy in mind, and that is Ohio State's C.J. Stroud. A man loved by Josh McCown almost as much as Josh McCown loves not jerking off.
That's what porn is a lot like. You go somewhere that you weren't expected to go. If you're not careful, you'll end up being somewhere where you don't want to be.
I really think Stroud is the most complete quarterback. He's a gifted passer and a capable athlete, and he deserves to come off the board first overall. Frank Reich finally gets his quarterback. So yes, I believe CJ Stroud is the best QB in this draft. He's 1A. immediately followed by 1B. No surprise here, Bryce Young, who goes to the Texans a pick later, joining former Bama teammate John Mechie in Houston. Young reminds me a little bit of Deshaun Watson in terms of play style, although he's got a lot of work to do in the being a piece of shit category. To me, the difference between Young and Stroud is that Young appears to be about as good as he can be. Obviously, all these guys can grow, but what I mean is Stroud is close to as polished as Young, but with a bit more of a ceiling to excel, if that makes sense. Then I think we have a trade up at number 4. The Indianapolis Colts deal the 4th overall pick to the Baltimore Ravens for Lamar Jackson. So yes, Lamar leaves the Ravens for Indy, but the Ravens select Anthony RIchardson and reset their offense with another hyper athlete at QB. Even if that doesn't happen, Richardson, while being the most raw of the top dogs, the raw dog, if you will, is a fucking cathedral when it comes to ceilings. If he can develop into a top 12 passer, he will be a league MVP. It is so hard to not get football turned on when you watch what he can do. After the Seahawks and Lions pass on QBs, the Raiders will pull the trigger on Will Levis because of course they do. He's been compared to Jay Cutler by scouts, so obviously he and Josh McDaniels will get along perfectly. Both Levis and Richardson need to develop, but I rank Richardson ahead of Levis, even though Levis is currently a better passer. Levis needs to become a consistent top 5 passer to be worth the pick though. Richardson does not. And he can be used immediately in situational football. Now, all the way back at 19, the Buccaneers surprise everyone and nab Hendon Hooker. Then Tanner McKee becomes a Titan in round 3. New England is praised for picking Stetson Bennett in the 4th. The Broncos take Jake Haener in the 5th, and the Miami Dolphins take Max Duggan in the 6th to absorb some of the brain trauma on goal-to-go plays. All in all, this is a way better and more interesting quarterback draft class than last year, and we're all going to be better for it. Last year's draft class was like a Snapple. This year's draft class is a Long Island iced tea. It has everything, and it will get us fucking drunk. Thanks for watching That's Good Sports. Please subscribe here on YouTube if you like football videos. I do a lot of them. Again, don't forget to check out the Anthony RIchardson Balls Deep Deep Dive episode. It's on the screen right now.